Continuing on page 22, Senate Bill 1324, bill to amend and reenact multiple sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the creation of the Opportunity Educational Institution. Report from the Committee on Education on February 13th. Report from the Committee on Appropriations on the 15th.
The gentleman from Salem, Mr. Habeeb.
Mr. Speaker, members of the body, Senate Bill 1324 is the Senate version of the Governor's Opportunity Education Institution bill. The House version was 2096, passed this body some time ago. The Senate version passed both the Education and Appropriations Committees with strong bipartisan support. I don't want to rehash everything in the bill, but I want to address a couple of misconceptions that are floating around. There's been some talk about this bill impacting a huge number of schools. As it was when it came through the House, the Senate version still only impacts 6 schools. Number two, there's been some talk that this bill is modeled after something that only happens in Louisiana and we're a better school for public education in Louisiana. The reality is a number of schools, a number of states have a process whereby the state can get involved in public schools, including Maryland, which by the same survey that rates us number 4 is rated number 1, including Massachusetts, which by the same survey is rated number 2. States that take public education very seriously but understand that the state has a moral and constitutional obligation to play in public schools. There's also been some question about the success of this program in other states, for example, in Louisiana, where things are not perfect, but nonetheless, in Louisiana, for example, test scores have gone up, and listen to this, in every single grade, in every single subject that are part of the Recovery School District for 3 straight years. Every grade in every subject has shown improvement. In addition, graduation rates in Recovery School District schools have gone from 50% to 86%. Ladies and gentlemen, that's success to me. Finally, the Washington Post had an editorial today endorsing this plan and responding to one other issue that people have raised. Some folks, especially in the Senate, have encouraged us to delay this bill for a year and study it. The Washington Post said, and I'll quote, "But to suggest, as is being argued by opponents in the Senate, that the plan be put on hold and, quote, studied, close quote, for another year is to ignore the urgency of change for schools where year after year, students who can't read, write, and do math dwarf the numbers of those who can. Mr. McDonnell is correct. The time for tolerance of failing schools is over." Ladies and gentlemen, I hope we'll pass the bill.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Ms. Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
All right. I have spoken about my objections to this bill several times on the floor, and I won't repeat everything that I said before, but I will say that my major concerns about this bill are that it removes all local taxpayer, voter, and parent participation in the school takeover process. No local input. Get that? No local input. That is wrong. This bill allows the state to take local tax dollars when the state decides to take over a school. That is wrong. This bill is truly an outrageous intrusion into local governance. We are always talking about the fact that the government that is closest to the people governs best. And this is such a contradiction to that philosophy that it's hard to even talk about it. And 6 schools being taken over with this process is 6 schools too many. I ask the body to reject this bill.
The gentlewoman from Richmond City, Ms. McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from Salem rise for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I will.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll preface my question by saying I thought I heard you say that this bill would only apply to 6 schools, but if you look at lines 238 to 239, where it says the supervision of any school that has been denied accreditation shall be transferred to the Opportunity Education Institution, am I correct that that portion of the bill is where you referenced the 6 schools that would be affected?
Mr. Speaker, I would tell the gentlelady there are 4 schools in Virginia that have been denied accreditation. They are Jefferson Houston Elementary in Alexandria, Lafayette Winona in Norfolk, William Ruffner Middle in Norfolk, and Peabody Middle in Petersburg. There are 2 schools in Virginia that have what's called a conditional accreditation. They are Lindenwood in Norfolk and Kip Topeka, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, in Northampton. There's another section of the bill which has a may line, which refers to schools that have been accredited with warning 3 years. There are currently only 2 schools in that category. So there are 4 unaccredited schools, there are 2 conditionally accredited schools, and there are 2 schools accredited with warning 3 years in a row.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield for a further question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I will.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, can the gentleman tell me how often schools go through the accreditation process?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I would tell the gentlelady that they are analyzed on an annual basis. In order to become unaccredited, you have to fail to meet your target 4 times. And let me put some more numbers on this because this is important. Of schools that are accredited with warning 1, so you may have seen a list that says you have a school that's a target because they've been accredited with warning. 74% of those schools become accredited in 1 year. So 74% never get to even accredited 2. After that, 90% are accredited before they get accredited with warning 3. So in order to become unaccredited, you have to fail to meet your target 4 years in a row. And of schools that become unaccredited 1 year with 1 warning, 90% of them never get to the 3rd accredited with warning. So again, we only have 6 schools that have gone from accredited with warning 1 all the way to unaccredited or conditional accreditation.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield for a further question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I will.
Gentleman yields.
But would the gentleman agree that while the current number of schools that would be impacted by this bill is 6, according to his responses, that number could very well change in the future?
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell the gentlelady it will change. It's going to go down. And the reason for that is we're not implementing this bill for 18 months. So some of those 6 are already on notice of what's coming, and I'm confident enough that the localities are going to do what it takes, that some number of those 6 are not even going to ever get there. But then we look at the list of schools who are within 4 years, and we know what that list of schools is. We know that by the status quo, 90% of them will never reach it. So by the status quo, only 10% of them would reach that point. Again, we believe, though, giving them an 18-month lead time coming into this, that in all likelihood the number will actually be lower. I have great confidence in the folks in Petersburg and Norfolk and Alexandria who are trying their best and have so far failed to reach the level that they need to, that at least some number of them will get there before this bill is even implemented.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I certainly hope the gentleman's right.
Gentleman from Newport News, Mr. Yancey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the body, I spoke last time about this bill in the House version. In regards to the Senate version, I would just bring to your attention that the 2 patrons were on that trip to Louisiana. They both saw the same things that I witnessed. They saw the successes of the students in Louisiana, and I think the one thing that we need to remind ourselves again, and I would stress for the words of the gentleman from Roanoke who expressed that this bill is about helping the children who are suffering in schools that are failing them. They want to succeed. They're looking for an opportunity to succeed and prove themselves, and this bill helps them in that endeavor. I thank you, and I would encourage you to vote for the bill.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
64, noes 34.
Ayes 64, noes 34. The bill is passed.